Okay, so this is the CSE DEETS, which is short for the details, and here we are interviewing Dan Gemeinhart, and I had to make sure that I got that name right because I know it's a hard one. Did I get it right, Dan?
You nailed it.
All right. Do you want me to call you Dan, Mr. G? Like,
Dan,
what's your preference?
when I was a teacher, I was Mr. G, but that would be fine. Or Dan's great too.
All right. So I'm talking with Dan Gemeinhart, and he is the author of two of our favorite books at Cold Spring Elementary, one of them being Scar Island, and for sure, The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. We love that one this year. So I want to introduce Dan and welcome you to talking to some of our CSE kids and families.
Hi there. I'm glad to be chatting with you guys. I know these are crazy times we're living in. You're all at home. Me and my kids and my wife are doing the same thing, and so it's good to have other things to talk about, little breaks to our routine. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. I feel like one of the first things I need to do, so I've got my CSE Strong hat on right now. I'm going to put on this hat and see if you have any reaction to it.
Oh, nice. Yes, that's a fantastic hat. That is where I went to college. A lot of pride. Absolutely. Go Zags.
So, Dan, where are you right now? Can you tell us where in the country you're talking to us from?
So I live in Washington State, and I don't live like on the west, over by the ocean, which is where all the big cities, Seattle and Tacoma are. We live like 3 hours out of there, up in a little town up in the mountains. And so I don't know how much you can see, probably not much. But we live out in the country. It's just we have a bunch like, I don't know, 300 yards of orchards, apples and pears, and then it's just the hills and the woods. And so we live in a little rural area, and it's a real pretty place.
Now, how far are you from Spokane?
Also about 3 hours. We're kind of, because those are like either side of the state, and we're kind of in the mountains right in the middle.
Well, what a beautiful view you have out your window. Actually, it's pretty nice in Minnesota this time of year too. So it's really starting to turn into spring. So we're getting out of the cold snap, and still a possibility. I mean, at any time we can still get snow. So, so when I kind of put some of the feelers out for our staff and our kids and what they wanted to know, first was about the characters in these stories, and I think we'll focus a little bit on Coyote because that one's really gotten a lot of hype out of our school.
Awesome.
So obviously Coyote Sunrise, she is a very unique character. Can you tell us about, like, how do you get the ideas for the persona behind these characters that come into your books?
You know, I think that's a great place to start, because I think the characters are the most important part of any story. No matter, they'll care about what happens in the story. If they don't care about your characters, they won't care, no matter how cool you make it. If you got this big, huge climax with explosions and excitement, and your main character might die, but the reader says, go ahead and die, I don't care, then you don't have them. It's not a good story. So character is what it's all about. And I don't have like a process I use. I really spend time trying to get to know my character. And when I write my books, usually I'll rewrite those first 6 or 7 chapters probably at least 10 times before I move on, and then more times later when I'm revising. But just to get in the flow of the book, I really have to feel like I know the main character, and I really try to make it so that the reader feels like they know that main character. And there's no process I do. I just try to listen to them, try to feel it out. And I'm a trial and error writer. And so I do a lot of deleting. I delete more than I keep. Well, I'll write a scene, and if it doesn't feel right, I'll delete it and say, okay, I'll try something else. And I'll write another scene. If that doesn't work, I'll delete it and try something else, to try to get to where I really feel like I know the character like a real person. So as the story continues, and when they're in situations, I'll know how they would react, and that reaction, those actions, those feelings and thoughts and words will feel real to the reader as well. So I'm glad that the characters resonate with you, because that is my primary focus when I'm writing a book, for sure.
Oh, I think the character of Coyote and the kind of the sidekicks that come onto the bus with her, you did a really great job of kind of developing them and getting us attached to them, all the way from some of the more minor characters like Lester, all the way down to Gladys.
Oh, Gladys.
Gladys the goat, right? Like,
it's so hard to develop Gladys the character. deep into her psyche, yeah.
Yeah. But what a perfect placement. And I got to tell you, that was one of the times that I laughed out loud. And spoiler alert, everybody, if you haven't read it, but end of the story, Gladys gets involved in kind of saving Coyote at a key moment.
Yes.
And everybody I've talked to about the book agreed that was kind of a marquee, like, laugh out loud moment. That's the purpose of Gladys. So.
Good, glad to hear it.
Yeah. Do you, speaking of characters, I mean, you have some great characters. Do you have a favorite character from another author or another book that you really loved?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm a big reader, probably no big surprise. I read 2 or 3 books a week for sure. And so sometimes people say, "What's your favorite book?" or "Who's your favorite author?" And I give like a 20-minute answer because I don't have like one favorite or 10 favorites. I've got like 300 favorite books. Some of my, okay, that's a good, interesting question. Okay, I love From Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus, which is an amazing book by Dusty Bowling. Long title, but the main character in that is a girl named Avon, and she is amazing and she's wonderful. There's a book called Three Times Lucky by Sheila Turnage, and the main character in that is a girl named Mo, and she is fantastic. Great voice, wonderful to root for. I love, it's actually in Coyote Sunrise, it's what Salvador says is his favorite book, is Ghost by Jason Reynolds. Amazing book, an amazing main character, really fun to cheer for and to root
Uh-huh.
on. There's a book called Train I Ride by Paul Mosier, which is a really beautiful, wonderful story. One of my favorite books. And the main character in that, I don't remember her name, but she's fantastic. I mean, like I said, I love stories and books.
Uh-huh.
And what I love about stories and books is characters. And so that's where it's at for me. So I've got dozens, if not hundreds of favorites.
Well, what a good lead into my next question, because we did notice as we were reading your book that there's a shout out to a couple other authors and books in there. That was fun to hear that those are also contemporary new titles that showed up in the book. One and Only Ivan, obviously by Applegate, and then I did write down Reynolds as well. Those are books that kids are reading right now and love them. We actually did Ivan as a school read aloud last year for one school, one book.
Awesome. That was a great choice. You can't get any better than that.
Yeah, right, right. So another question that came up really talks about the writing process. Some kids wanted to know about how do you even start by you have some ideas. How does it even turn into a book? Can you give us like the 30,000 foot like
Yeah,
quick
totally.
overview of like kind of your process?
Yeah, and since I'm here in my office, I even can have some visual aids. So for me, writing is a messy process for sure. Some writers, they say, they have these charts and they go through these outlines, and I am not that way at all. So I get an idea, and usually it sits in my head for a long time before I start writing it down, because I just think about it, I add to it, I think, how could that turn into a story? What are some things that could be in a story about that? Sometimes years, I have an idea in my head, and then I start doing brainstorming. Now, I never outline. Outlining is great, and if your teachers make you pre-write an outline, that's the best way to write for sure. I just make it work, but I do some brainstorming where just like free-form association. I've got one that I did for my book Good Dog, and so this. It's like I just kind of, it's like the scribblings of a madman for sure. I just have different ideas and then I connect as I do like brain clusters or word webs. There's different things you can call these where anything that pops in my head, well, if this happens, this could happen. Well, maybe this could be a part of that scene. Maybe this is something the character struggles with. Well, if that's something the character struggles with, maybe this could happen. And so and that's like the first half of the book, and then it keeps going. So that's kind of my process. And I do a lot of scribbling out and erasing and trial and error. And then I really start writing, and I don't have a plan when I start usually. I probably know how it's going to start, and I might know how it's going to end, but everything in between I make up as I go, which is a really messy way to write. So I write myself into dead ends, and I realize, 3 chapters ago I took a wrong turn, then I have to delete that, 2 weeks of work and start over again. But it ends up being kind of the way my brain works. Now, the one that I'm working on now, I was really struggling with. I couldn't figure out the whole spiel of it. And so this one I kind of outlined. I can show you that too. So up here on my bulletin board, this is the one I'm working on. And so those note cards are the scenes, and I've got little code. I've got little stars and symbols and stuff because I was having a hard time getting the flow of it. And so I did that, and it really helped. I think I'm going to try to do that from now on, because it was like if this scene happens here, then this scene needs to happen before it. But for those two scenes to make sense, this one needs to happen in between them. And like the whole story snapped into focus. It was super helpful. So this is the closest I've come to like an outlining. And
I was gonna I was
like
gonna
it.
say you better be careful because you're gonna have an outline pretty soon.
Totally. And I'm almost done. Like these are the ones at the bottom of the scenes I still have to write to add in. So I'm going to finish it maybe this week or next week, which is a great feeling because like I said, it's been kind of a tough one. I've really struggled with it. I've thrown probably 300 pages away where I've started and thrown it away and started and thrown it away. And so it feels great that I finally figured it out and I'm loving it. And I'm really close to wrapping it up and sending it off.
Okay. Well, I've got one more question, or two more questions actually. One is, do you have any advice? Obviously, you're a former librarian media teacher, um, and we have a lot of kids that are trying to become readers. And do
That's
you have any advice for them as they continue to work through, becoming a reader at an elementary age student?
totally. Well, that's a great question. And I would say there's a quote, and I really should look it up so I can credit the person who said it because it's a great quote. And I'm a big believer in reading, but I know that some people it's not their thing, and that is totally fine. But I would hope that you would keep giving it a shot because the quote that I love is, "There's no such thing as a kid who doesn't love to read. There's only a kid who hasn't found the right book yet."
Yep.
And I think that's more true now than ever because like books for younger readers have gotten so amazing in the last 20 years. You guys don't know how good you have it compared to like when I was a kid and there was like Charlotte's Web and that's about it. I mean,
Yep.
it wasn't that bad. But these days, there's so many authors writing so many great books, no matter what kind of story you want to read or how you want to read it. I mean, graphic novels didn't even exist like 15 years ago, and now they're just amazing. So if you love, and like all the funny, like Captain Underpants and Wimpy Kid, that wasn't a thing when I was a kid
Right.
either. So if you want funny, silly stories, you've got a million to choose from. If you want graphic novels because you love those pictures, I do too. You've got a million to choose from. If you want real sad books that deal with real tough, serious issues, middle grade books these days, they're dealing with real big, tough stuff. And if you like those emotional, real life stories, there's a million to choose from. If you want fantasy or sci-fi, like no matter what kind of a reader you are, no matter what kind of story you like, it's just a great time to be a reader. And so if you're like struggling with reading, that's totally fine. A lot of us struggle with lots of things.
Hmm.
But keep trying, keep going back to the library when you can. I know we're all locked out. But I promise, you might be a kid who says, I hate reading, I've never read a book that I liked. I've heard that a million times. That's totally legit. But keep trying, because I guarantee, I don't even know you, but I promise there are books in your library that you will love if you find them. So if there's a book that you almost liked, what did you almost like about that book? And see if you can find books that have more of that in it, because they're out there. And reading can add so much to your life. You can learn about yourself. You can learn about other people. You can just go on an adventure. Like here I am locked in my house basically, but I can go on these amazing adventures because I've got books. And if you have those stories in your head, those stories in your heart, no one can ever take them away from you. The books that I've read and the books that I've loved, they're still a part of me and they're always going to be mine. And that's kind of an amazing thing. So yeah, I'm no big surprise. I'm a big fan of reading and think everyone should be too.
Do you have a favorite moment for Coyote in the book?
I think that my favorite moment for Coyote would probably be when her and Salvador were on top of the bus and they were shouting secrets. I think I'm not saying it's the best scene or even my favorite scene, but I think it's my favorite Coyote moment because it's an important one for her. It's when she really cements that friendship, which she needs. She has no friends, and that's a big moment for her to have someone else in her life besides Rodeo. And it's also when she makes herself vulnerable. She shares some things that she's never shared with anyone else that she can't share with Rodeo because of the weirdness of their relationship. And so it's not just a finding a friend, it's a really reaching out and an opening up that I think makes the rest of the story kind of possible. So that's probably my favorite Coyote moment.
Is Rodeo is Rodeo modeled after somebody you know?
No, definitely not. Although theoretically, he's kind of modeled after me. I'm not Rodeo at all, but I kind of based the family in that story on my own family, even though we're all thankfully still alive. But in the story, it's the mom and the dad and the three daughters before the accident.
Uh-huh.
In my life, it's me and my wife and our three daughters. We live in a small town in Washington State, just like the family there. And the whole story came out of a daydream I had one day where I was home alone with my middle daughter. My wife and the other two were out running errands. And I had this horrible thought, like, what would happen to me and her if something happened to them on the way home and they never made it home? What would that do to us? How would we survive that? How would we move on as like a little family after suffering a loss like that? And I thought, oh, well, we couldn't live in this house with all these memories, so we'd have to move, but there's nowhere else I want to live. So maybe we would travel around for a while. And the whole idea of this heartbroken girl and her dad kind of running away from their sadness came out of that horrible daydream. And so Rodeo is kind of based on me. If that happened, I would be broke. Like he's a good guy. He's a loving dad in his own way, but he's a
Hmm.
really broken person, right? And he's not super functional. And I could definitely see that happening to myself. He's good natured. He's got a good heart. I hope I have a good heart. But he's kind of doing the best he can, but he's not doing that great. And I that felt true to me. If I suffered a loss like that, I would try really hard to hold it together, but I know that I would be broken inside in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, he's kind of based on me, not really. But we like the same kind of music. And and that kind of thing. I got to put myself into him. But yeah, so he's definitely fictional, but maybe springing off of who I am and what might happen to me.
All right. I have one last question, and I think it's going to be a short one. What are you currently reading?
I just finished a book called A Game of Fox and Squirrels, which is amazing and beautiful. And I'm about 5 chapters into Manana Land by Pam Munoz Ryan, and she's one of my favorites. I give a shout out to her and Coyote. She wrote Esperanza Rising, which is an amazing.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Echo, yep, Echo, which is amazing. This is her new one. It just came out, I think, this month or last month. So Manana Land, and so far so great.
Uh, Great. So thankful that you took the time to talk with us. Our kids are going to be so excited to hear from you. And they often think about these authors as these mythical people that are out there, and they have a hard time realizing that they're real people. So it's so fun to actually talk with you and get a response back from you about this wonderful book that you wrote, The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. It has
Awesome.
absolutely been a pleasure. Any
Yeah.
final words of wisdom?
Well, I mean, yeah. Keep having. I mean, these are crazy times. I mean, make the best of it. I know none of us wanted this to happen, but make the most of it. Read some great books. Connect with your family. We'll all be looking forward to going back to school in September. I hope. Fingers crossed. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for reading. Thanks for sharing my books with your students. And take care. Stay healthy. Wash your hands. And we'll all get back together in September.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.